I'm going to try to put my voice out there. It's a little hoarse this morning. Had to drink some hot tea so I can, just be ready to give you what you want to hear this morning and what we all need. This is all about forgiveness. All about forgiveness. And one thing that we need to understand when it comes to forgiveness, for you to really know what it's all about, for you to go beyond your wildest imagination to try to figure it out, you have to know who you are first. You have to identify who you are. And I'm not talking about being a teacher or a pastor or anything in your career or your status. I'm talking about who you are in the eyes of God. We pretty much know who we are in the eyes of God. We're just this small. We're sinners. And that's the first thing we have to know. We have to know exactly who we are, because there's no one righteous in this world. We know that. No one. The Bible talks about that. It says that in Romans, it says that there is no one righteous, not even one. We all have gone astray. We all have turned away. We all have become worthless. And there's no one who does good, not even one. We may do a little good here and there, but we make mistakes. We make mistakes. And so that's what put us in that category. I'm a sinner. And I had to know that before I even know I needed forgiveness. I had to identify myself as a sinner. And, normally I'm a good person, as we all say, but I make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And so, in other words, we need God, and we all need to be forgiven so that we can be healed. Forgiveness heals you inside out. Without a shadow of a doubt, it does. The Bible talks about a woman in St. John, the 8th chapter, caught in the act of adultery. And of course, the Jewish leaders, these guys had a lot of zeal for throwing stones at people, and the Sadducees and the Pharisees, they're ready to stone her to death. My question is, where's the man? It takes two to commit adultery, But they were pounding the woman. So then again, here we go. There was discrimination back then, judging back then, and looking at the woman as, y'all the sinners and we're the holy guys. And so Jesus said to accusers, y'all know what he said. He said, he that is without sin among them, first cast the stone, cast that first stone. And these guys began to drop those stones, from the oldest to the youngest. Of course, you know how young guys can be. Well, I'm one of the oldest ones, so a little wiser. And you know how the young guys can be. They take time. They have to think about it. Like they're not sure what they're going to do. That's how we are when we're young. And but as you get older, you get a little wiser, and you figure things out a little quicker. And so these guys drop their stones. The older guys drop their stones. Like, hey, I know I'm not good. I know what I did last night or the night before. I'm a sinner. I'm not going to stone her. The young guys, follow the example of the older guys. And that's what it's all about. We older guys have to be examples for those young ones coming up behind us, when it comes to dealing with this world. And anyway, they all discovered that they were just as much a sinner as the woman who committed the act of adultery. So we all need to drop our stones. We all need to drop our stones and not be so quick to pass judgment, because we are all sinners. And that's something that we really have to understand. In the baggage that we have in our lives, because we carry baggage, right? We carry burdens. But have you really thought about what the baggage and the burdens are that you carry? Somebody makes you mad and you get angry. Something happened in your life when you were growing up. You get angry. I've dealt with young people who have been physically abused, sexually abused, who've been rejected, who parents just left them on the doorstep, and they are angry. They are mad, and they carry this baggage all through life, and sometimes we do too, but it'll tear you up inside. And sometimes you get so angry, you do the same thing to somebody else. You know, and it tears you up inside. I'll give you a good example. Y'all know about King David. You know, yeah, somebody knows about King David. King David, you know, when you read the Bible, you don't read it exactly and get it. You think he was the righteous guy in the world, you know, but he wasn't. You know, he wasn't. He was just like you and I. You know, just like you and I. You know, he saw Bathsheba one morning, and he was like, my goodness, who is that girl? You know, who is she? Wow. He said, hey, I want to find out who she is. Send somebody to get it. You know, tell her, come on up here and see me. And the guy's like, no, she's married. She can't. He said, no, bring her up here. You know, tell her king wants her. Come on, tell her king wants her, you know. And of course, we know the story. He committed adultery. But then he went a little step further. He said, you know what? And she came back to him and she said, well, David, yeah, we had a pretty good time, and I only did what you wanted me to do because you're my king, but I'm pregnant. And David said, okay, I got to try to hide my sin. Don't want nobody to know. I'm the king, you know. I can't let nobody know I slept with her, you know. So he asked for a husband to come. Y'all know the story. Bring him back from battle. Was hoping that, and sat him down and got him drunk, you know, because if you figure you get drunk, you know, he'll do anything David says. Got him drunk and say, why don't you go home and be with your wife? That's why I brought you back from the battlefield. Go home and be with your wife. You know, y'all have a good time, you know. In other words, relate with her. But this man was more righteous and more honest than David. He was like, no, I can't do that. I'm going to stay with my soldiers, and I'll sleep right at the front of the gates of the city and stay with my soldiers. I can't go home. I can't do that. And David didn't know what to do. It's like, oh, my God, Jesus. This sin of mine is going to come out. So he had the guy killed. We know that. Had him killed. And the thing about us and some of the acts that we commit, some of the things that we do wrong for whatever reason, because somebody did it to you or just because you're lusting or whatever, that's what brings the baggage in your life. That's where the baggage comes from. That's where the burdens come from, because, you know, God, he'll forgive you. No doubt about it. But you've already set the stage for the consequences of that baggage and that burden. And so sometimes, you know, we bring it upon ourselves. Sometimes it may come from other places, you know. And what happened was, but that thing, it disrupts your life. It just tears your life apart. You know, that's what it did to David's life. It hurt him, and it hurt the lives of those in his family and in his kingdom. You know, so whatever you do, it not only affects you, but it affects everybody else. It trickles downhill. You know, there's nothing like going home, you know, and being in a bad mood, and you pound on your wife about it. I mean, verbally pound on your wife about it. Or you tell your kids, I don't have time for you. You know, I need a break. You know, and it affects them. You know, it affects them as well. Or it's nothing like going out, committing an act, a sinful act, and coming home and expecting your relationship to still be on board. It just doesn't happen that way, you know. And like David, we can't hide it, you know, because the consequences of it is going to haunt us. And so that's what happened to David. The pain and the guilt was just too great for him to bear. You know, what happened was that his life was never the same. I mean, never the same. His family was never the same. His kingdom was never the same. Murder was a constant threat in his family all the time because of what he did. You know, and the Bible says his son Absalom rebelled against him. The son he loved, the son who looked like David, the son who was just as handsome as David. David's pride and joy turned against him. All because of what David did. You know. And then he slept with David's concubines. You know, disgraced his father. All because of what his father did. David's first child, Bathsheba, the first child he had, died. You know, so sin disrupted David's life. He carried a lot of baggage. It hurt him. The baggage hurt him, and it was too great pain to bear. Sometimes he couldn't eat. Sometimes he couldn't sleep. Sometimes David couldn't even think right, or do anything right. The book of Psalms tells us in that 51st verse, it says that, and my sin is ever before me, is always there. It's going to be there. That burden, you're going to always carry that burden. You got to do something about it. Because you don't have to carry it. It can be released. I don't care what happened in your life with your father, your mother. I don't care what happened in your life that you may have done wrong. I don't care who've done you wrong. Those are all burdens that you carry unless you do something to release them. Because sin is a burden. Because that's all it is. It's just sin. It has all these titles, these different titles, but it boils down to one thing. Sin, it is a burden. It is a disease, and it eats at the hearts of all mankind. It'll eat you up. It'll tear your life apart. Sin is hatred. Sin is racism. Sin is discrimination. It is violence. And what does it do? It causes division and separation in your family, in your life, on your job, and you're trying to figure out, why are these things happening to me? And that's why. Yes, sir.
I know we only got a little bit of time. You got gold, and I got to get it. I need it.
Okay. Okay.
You're in an unusual situation when you read in national news where you go and you know the situation and you go and give forgiveness where anybody in their right mind would say, not only do they not deserve that forgiveness, but you've got to be crazy. I couldn't give it. So
yeah.
I'd like to hear, it's so fantastic, I'd like to hear, I know you did it, I know God was in the center of it, He empowered. What was in your mind, you look back on it, what was the enemy doing? What was the spiritual war? The things that were being put to you, like, why not to do this? Don't do this. Are you going to be a chump? You're going to look foolish. What was the enemy strategy there? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. The enemy strategy there was to start a race war. The enemy wanted Charleston to burn down. The enemy wanted Charleston to go back to slavery. That's what the enemy wanted. And so the only way to get it was what? Come to a historical church that had historical value that had been burned down because of slavery, that had been burned down because Denmark Vesey tried to come into the city and kill all the white people. A lot of history was behind that church. A lot of history in Charleston entailed slavery and the things that had happened to us. And he wanted us, the devil wanted us to go right back to it. And the only way to get back to it is what? Stir up those ancestors, stir up those descendants of the slaves, right? So we can burn it down. We can burn it down and start this thing all over again. So yeah, the enemy was there. But the grace of God was there as well. And God just intervened. I can't, we didn't have a conversation about when you're coming, but I know when I was going through it, okay, and thinking about the young man Dylan Roof who committed this heinous act, first thing came to my mind is, what was he thinking? Didn't look at him as white or black or anything. What was he thinking? Didn't get really angry at him, angry enough to say, why did he do this to my wife? He doesn't even know her. And I really didn't want to have anything to do with him, period. Didn't care who he was. I was concentrating on what happened in my life with my wife. But God intervened. See, like we all have a story. That was my story, but God came in and changed that story. Changed that story. He had a great, my story was part of a larger story, and that's what I'm doing right now. But I had no idea. Yes, sir.
So, was the forgiveness spontaneous, or did the survivors have a meeting beforehand and say, "Hey, we're going to have this public thing, and let's agree to forgive these people"? Was it planned or was it spontaneous?
No plan. It was spontaneous. Yeah. Remember now, 2 days after the tragedy, because in federal crime, you have to have a bond hearing in 48 hours. And so 2 days after the tragedy, here we are. We didn't have time to think about anything. And you heard what I said last night. I didn't want to go to the bond hearing. And the survivors, everybody didn't go to the bond hearing. And though it was Nadine, Alicia, There's about 5 of us who went to the barbecue, of the family members of those who lost loved ones. And we didn't see each other until then. And then we really didn't talk at all. It was very spontaneous. Nadine, young lady, was the first one to say, and she told this guy all about her mother and how she loved her mother. And she said, but you know what? God have mercy on your soul. I forgive you. So it was spontaneous. Nothing planned at all. It was totally in the vision of God. Because I know Nadine personally. Nadine, when I heard that, I'm like, that's not Nadine. Okay. No. Nadine would take you and try to choke your neck and drag you through the mud. That's Nadine. And when I heard that, I'm like, oh, you know, it was all God.
So I'm not sure if this is going to come out as a question or
Yeah.
something I'm trying to process after hearing you share your story yesterday. So I think, like, personally, there's a frustration that I wrestle with, that it always feels as if the victim has to do the forgiving when we talk about racism as it relates to our history here. And I don't see a consistency across the board, and I think that my challenge is more to us as believers, right? So I had my youngest daughter dealt with her first like blatant racism maybe a year and a half ago. My daughter's 14, so she was 12 at the time.
Yeah.
And she was at a music camp, for a 10-day music camp, and she had a young man approach her, or the discussion and the conversation was built around him saying that, what took place when slavery was abolished was illegal, because the people were actually someone's property, and people should still be property because they stripped property away. So my daughter's been like kind of brought up in a family where we like address those issues, and we understand that there's different categories. And she's taught that there's ignorance, and that's a teachable moment, and there's like blatant racism that needs to be addressed very directly.
Right.
So that was her first time dealing with that, where she had to address it. And she handled it really well, and I was proud of her.
Good. That's good. That's good.
So as I shared that with a diverse group, so I'm from Detroit, and I'm part of a couple different groups that deal with racism within Christianity.
Okay.
The first group was called Facing Race, where we like, all right, we're going to have this discussion in a safe space. And there was a spinoff called Race Matters, and my daughter came and she shared that with the group.
Wow.
And it was a lot to I guess, to take in. And hear a 12-year-old talk about that type of experience, a lot of people want to get in fix mode, right? And I think, one of the things was we had an older white male that was a believer, and he tried to fix it, and we didn't. I think he didn't understand is that, like, she was much more mature on this topic than he was, and that was weird because he's older and she's younger, but she has a lot more experience in that space.
Okay.
So his wife came back at the next session, and she gave me a bunch of scriptures on forgiveness, right, and how, what it would look like to receive that young man and show him the love of Christ and forgive him, and a bunch of things that I believe in and they're biblically sound. And so her challenge was to say, so why isn't this the initial response? And I said, that's a lovely question. I really appreciate you bringing that up. I wonder why that wasn't our response at 90, right, as a Christian nation, right? So I guess that's the frustration for me, right? The onus and the forgiveness is always put on the burden
on the victim
of us, right, and not our brothers and sisters at the same time. And it's a challenging, it's just difficult. So,
Yeah.
so I appreciate you and lead that. So I guess I'd love to hear your response, and I'll probably have to follow up.
Well, it's left up to you. I hope I can respond to that. It is a challenge, you know, and a lot of times it seems like it is the victim who has to say, you know, hey, I forgive you, which is a good thing, because then it releases you from everything, from carrying that burden, carrying that baggage, from not letting that person be a part of your life. It just releases you and it gives you the peace and the freedom you need. So it's a good thing, whether the victim or the perpetrator. For the perpetrator, they have to do the same thing. You understand? I'm not saying they will. Take, for example, Dylan Roof. We, in the courtroom, during the court proceedings, we were in court like for 4 weeks, you know, a month, almost 2 months. And every day, he showed no remorse. Every day, he just got crazier and crazier about how he felt about black people, Jews, Muslims. I mean, he just went on and on. And he said, if he had the opportunity, he'd do it again. You know, so that's his burden. You understand? That's his problem. He has to carry that baggage. You know, you forgiving him, you're released. And a news reporter came to me afterwards, put me in the courtroom and said, listen, you heard all these bad things he said about y'all. You still want to forgive this guy? I said, well, I'm not going to give him my peace back. You know, and so I hope that answers your question.
Okay,
Yeah.
but it does lead me to a follow-up question.
Go ahead.
So I hear that, I think to some degree I understand that. So I guess the question that I have to that is, if there's no repentance, right?
Yeah.
What do you do with that when you still are vulnerable, right? So like Dylan Root is behind bars, and I'm not sure if he's been executed already.
No,
Okay,
no.
so he's not necessarily a threat, a direct threat.
Right.
I think that we still wrestle with being in denial that racism still exists and is a part of our the fabric and DNA of the nation.
Okay.
So that there's no repentance.
Right.
There's more denial.
More denial.
Which leads us to continuing to like perpetuate.
Well,
right?
not really.
In a bunch of different ways.
Yeah.
So
You
I guess
can-
that's the
Let me tell you, I see where you're going. I understand. I see where you're going. Now you, as the victim, and you do the forgiveness, you can't concentrate on what the perpetrator. You already know what that perpetrator. You know what
You're
they're
not forgiving them then.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be the one to take that, like what I'm doing. You have to take that,
Yeah.
and you have to put it out there. It starts.
Now, I was just gonna say the Amish. What
Okay.
happened, crazy guy goes in and shoots up a bunch of kids in the classroom. The first thing they did was exactly what you did.
Mm-hmm.
They forgave.
They forgave.
And they prayed for his wife and they prayed for his family.
That's right.
You know, but they forgave. And that was white on white. That
White
was,
on white.
That was,
Yeah.
you know, these are poor Amish who were defenseless
Yeah.
and everything.
And
So,
I received that. I think the thing is he's no longer a threat, right? So it's
Right.
like, I think the challenge that went out to one of the examples that you gave,
Yeah.
what ended up happening is, okay, let the ones I was saying cast the first stone, but what he ended up saying to her is go and sin no more.
No more.
I
Right.
think what happened with David after having that traumatic experience, there was some correction that took place.
Exactly.
David didn't go and find another Bathsheba, right?
Right.
Because he had suffered
Right.
a penalty that he would have never wanted to pay when he lost his son.
Right.
And I just don't think that as a nation
We're doing
we've
it.
done that. I don't think that we've
Oh, no.
decided, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. I think that we said we're not going to talk about it anymore, but we'll continue to do it, right? So I think that the repentance is not there, which makes it more challenging to forgive because it's like I'm gonna have to forgive again and again and again, right?
And that's the whole thing behind it. You as a victim, you're not receiving any remorse, the perpetrator's not repenting, you know, and that's why you got to forgive, because you got to leave all that out. You got to forget all that. You know, you can't concentrate on the perpetrator, because then if you have, then it means you really haven't forgiven this person.
Yeah, and I
You know.
think So victim is probably, thank y'all for like letting us wrestle through this. I appreciate it.
This is
I appreciate
great.
that.
This is
But-
great.
But I think that like the victim, and I don't like necessarily, it's probably semantic, so I wouldn't like harp on that.
Yeah.
But I guess what I would say is like, I think that I've moved from a place to saying, thinking about it as a victim. I'm at a space where I'm like seeing my white brothers and sisters,
Yeah.
and this being such an uncomfortable conversation
Okay.
for them to figure out, like, did I play a part in that?
Yeah.
Did I play a part of that? I never had a slave. You know what I mean? I don't believe it. Like, I'm not racist and that thing, things of those nature. I'm like, man, like, you're not free. You know what I mean? I think that
Who's not free?
our white brothers and sisters
Yeah. Oh.
are not willing to dive into this
Okay.
space, right?
Yeah.
And see the connection, right? And
Yeah.
like own some of the responsibility, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it's more of that now than it is I'm not willing to forgive. I'm like, man, like you're gonna stay bound by
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we're gonna do some of the, it's not like some of the stuff that we heard earlier. We're not going to address it. We're not going to wrestle with it. It's going to stay suppressed.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And I think that at least in spaces where I fellowship with other black believers, that leads to people wondering if white evangelical Christians are really genuine Christians.
Genuine
right?
Christians.
Because like it were like, I mean, the pictures that we see of people hanging from trees, those were Christians at those rallies, right? So like, until there's some like repentance and some
Yeah.
intentional
the
reconciliation taking place, that always
It's
going to keep us divided.
Oh yeah,
right?
it is.
And I'm talking about believers. I'm not talking about white. and black.
Yeah,
I'm
right. I
talking about,
understand. Yeah.
like, I am talking about white and black believers, or
Right.
you know, yeah. So
But all believers.
yeah.
Yes, sir. Let me ask this last question.
The gentleman asked a question about, was the forgiveness instantaneous
Yes, sir.
or earlier?
Yes, sir.
Was that in the 48 hours? You said the bond hearing had to take place within 48 hours.
Yes, sir.
And within that 48 hours, you mentioned a lady named Nadine.
Nadine.
Yeah, and her nature isn't like that?
No.
Normally like that?
No, it's not.
What preceded that instantaneous? I would think you would in prayer. I mean, individually in prayer, with the
Yeah.
Lord saying, give me, make my forgiveness possible, or did this just happen?
Well, it was instantaneous, but you brought up a good point for people who have to think about this, who need this time to rationalize. Yeah, you do need to have a conversation with the Lord. You know, it was hard for you to do it. You do need to go to the Lord. First of all, ask Him to forgive you, and then ask Him to help you to forgive that perpetrator.
You know, when I'm confronted, I've never been confronted with anything that horrific, but when I'm confronted with something, and I feel anger coming along, and I want to retaliate, I have to ask the Lord to give me the
Yes.
power not to do that. You know,
Amen.
I can't imagine
Amen.
if I was faced with what you were faced with,
Yes, sir.
and the other people in your
Yes, sir.
church,
Yes,
your
sir.
community were faced with. I couldn't do that on my own.
Okay.
It took me longer to forgive
Yeah.
Ruth than it took you to forgive him and the family to forgive him. It took me weeks.
Yes, sir.
I lived 4 blocks from the church.
Yeah. What?
I'm in Charleston.
Okay.
I'm still mad about it, but I think
Yes, sir.
I've forgiven him.
All right. You haven't forgiven him, you said?
I have forgiven him,
You
yes.
have.
But Nadine,
Yeah.
did the Lord tell her to forgive him? I mean, did you talk to her about how she came to that place?
Nadine, you know, from talking to her, it was just spontaneous. Because, like I told you, that's not her nature. You know, and that's why when I heard it, I was like, what? You know, and we have talked since then. And she said she know her mama would want her to do that. You know, and she wanted to respect her mother. And this is one reason why she did what she did. You know.
Did she make that decision instantaneously, or did she make it, before?
She made it right there and during the bond hearing, she made that decision right there at that time. Before then, she was terrified, she was mad, she was angry, she was hating this guy like crazy, you know. And but when she got in that courtroom, something just took over. And she thought about respecting her mom and what her mama wanted to do. And so that's why she did it.
I think I remember you saying that words came out of your mouth at that bond hearing.
Yes, sir.
You did not anticipate.
Yeah, I did not anticipate it. I really had nothing to say. I didn't even want to be there. I didn't see the sense of being there. And so, yeah, that was all God.
Did you know that the judge was going to ask you to say something?
Had no idea.
Nobody knew that you were.
Nobody knew. It was very unusual for the judge to ask people, the family, to stand, because you have to understand this judge too.
What color was the judge?
White. It was a white judge. And this judge had been in trouble a long time for racism. He was a racist, you know. And so you have to understand a little bit about him for why he asked this reason. He was trying to do a little penance, because when he first came out, he said, "Now I want you to understand that something tragic happened here today, and 9 people were killed, and we have to respect the families, and we have to look at this, you know, and we have to learn how to try to handle this together." Then he turned around and said, "But there's also another family involved, and that's the family of the person who did the killing. And we have to respect them too, and we have to understand their heart." And everybody's like, "What the heck is he talking about?" And so I think he did a little penance by inviting the families to speak, because that is unusual, especially the Court of Charleston. I worked the courts for 27 years, and that doesn't happen. So we were all surprised, though we didn't know.